They started planning the murder in McDonald's. McDonald's, over Happy Meals. They were eating Happy Meals and planning 2 murders. So the original plan was for Lucas to get 4 knives from his aunt's house, walk the short distance to Kim's house, hop over the fence, somehow climb up and knock on the bathroom window, which was on the 2nd floor, and Kim was going to let him in and they were going to commit the murders. The original plan was for Lucas to kill the mother, Elizabeth, and for Kim to kill her sister, Katie. So Monday, the 11th of April rolls around. This was the day that they planned to carry out the murders. So Lucas followed through with the plan. He got the knives, walked the short distance, knocked on the bathroom window, and Kim didn't answer. Kim had fallen asleep. You fell asleep? Kim had fallen asleep. Okay, so the plan was called off. They couldn't do it. Tuesday, the 12th of April rolls around. Lucas gets the knives again. He walks that short distance, hops the fence, knocks onto the window, and no one answers. Kim, you guessed it, had fallen asleep again. Now, this says one of 2 things to me. It says either 1, she was just so cold and detached from the whole situation that she could fall asleep. So yeah, it either tells me she's really cold and detached and just doesn't care at all, or she wasn't really asleep and she was just having second thoughts and she didn't let Lucas in. So then Wednesday, the 13th of April comes around, and unfortunately this was the day that Kim and Lucas carried out the murders. So as we know from the original plan, Lucas was the one that was going to kill Elizabeth, and it was decided that he was going to go first. So he crept into Elizabeth's bedroom, and that's when he brutally murdered Elizabeth. Now, the autopsy showed that she was stabbed a total of 8 times, and 5 of these stab wounds were actually in her hands. They were deemed as defensive wounds. So she was really trying to fight off Lucas. She, unfortunately, it seems, was alive through most of this attack. And one of the stab wounds that was deemed to be the stab wound that was fatal was to her neck. And Lucas later on, when he confessed to this, said that he intentionally targeted the throat because of the voice box. So he stabbed Elizabeth twice in the throat, damaging her voice box so she couldn't make a noise, so she couldn't scream out for help. Now, during this attack, Kim was just still in the bathroom. She was waiting for Lucas, but she could hear noises coming from her mother's room. So she went into the room because she was concerned about Lucas. Yeah, she was concerned about her boyfriend, not her mom. And when she went into the room, she saw a hand reaching out, and she immediately took the hand because she thought it was Lucas's. But when she realized that the hand actually belonged to her mom, she immediately pulled her hand away in disgust. She just had that much hatred for her mom, and that point right there is the part that has stuck with me the most from this story. So now it was Kim's turn to murder her sister Katie, but she couldn't go through with it. She told Lucas that she did not have the mental strength to carry out the murder. So they decided that Lucas would do it instead. He went to Katie and Kim's room because obviously they shared a room, and he brutally murdered Katie as well, and he murdered her in a very similar way. The autopsy shows that she was stabbed multiple times, twice in the neck again, and she was also smothered. And then Friday the 15th of April rolls around, and all 3 still missing. The 2 girls didn't go to school. Elizabeth didn't turn up to work again. This was just suspicious because this just didn't happen. Friends and family and neighbours were trying to get hold of all 3 of them. They were phoning their phones, no answer. They were also going around to the house, and there was no one answering the house. All they heard was a dog barking inside. So the police were informed. They got many missing person reports, and because it had been 2 days, the police did decide to go around the house and perform a welfare check. They arrived at the house, were knocking, banging on the door, and like everybody else, no one was answering the door. they could just hear the dog barking inside the house. So they decided to break down the door. So when they entered the house, the first thing that they came across was two teenagers, which was Kim, one of the daughters that was missing, and her boyfriend, Lucas Markham. They came across them just in the living room, actually cuddled up on a mattress. They were just watching TV, seemingly completely oblivious to what was going on. I mean, people had been banging on this door for like 2 days. They were phoning. And it was just like they were in a completely like in their own little world. So the police had obviously found the one daughter, but they were like, okay, so where's your sister? Where's your mom? And Kim, the daughter that they found in the living room, very coldly, very matter-of-fact tone, just looked at the police and just said, upstairs. One word, that's it, upstairs. So the police were like, are they okay? What's wrong? Is there something wrong with them? Like, what's going on? To which Lucas, the boyfriend, responded to the police in the same kind of cold, matter-of-fact tone to the police. Why don't you go upstairs and see? So the police went upstairs. They entered the bedroom of the mother Elizabeth first, and what they found was a horrific scene. It was a complete bloodbath. They found Elizabeth's body in her own bed, and there was just blood everywhere. She was covered in blood, and there was blood sprayed all up the walls. So fearing the worst, because they just found the mother Elizabeth, they entered the next bedroom, which was the bedroom of Kim and Katie. They shared a bedroom, these sisters, and they feared the worst at this point. They didn't know what kind of situation they were going to find Katie in. And unfortunately, they did also find Katie dead in her own bed. They pulled back the quilt and she was covered in blood as well, very similar to her mother. So immediately on the scene, the police arrested both Kim and Lucas on suspicion of murder. So can you just imagine like the scene that the police walked in on? They first walked in on these two teenagers cuddled up on a mattress, watching TV, oblivious to the world, like in their own little world. And then upstairs, they find a mother and a daughter brutally murdered. It just seems like so crazy. There was just these two worlds, like the upstairs and the downstairs. They couldn't have been further apart. It was just very polarizing, the differences between the upstairs and the downstairs. Like, can you even imagine like what the police must have been thinking? But what they did after the murders in those 36 hours is somehow even more shocking. So the first thing they did after the attacks is they took a bath together, because they wanted to wash off all of the blood. The police found blood sprayed everywhere. I mean, this was a bloodbath. Blood got everywhere. They had a bath to wash off all the blood, and their reasoning behind this was because they didn't want the dog to smell the blood on them. Yeah, remember there's a dog in the house at the time. And then they watched the Twilight films. Hence the name, The Twilight Killers. They watched 4 out of the 5 Twilight films, and I feel like that's not really very important that they only watched 4, but why only 4? What happened to the 5th one? So Kim and Lucas were sentenced like any other adult. They were both sentenced to 20 years in prison. However, on appeal, this was lowered to 17.5 years. So they are both still in prison, obviously. And if they complete their full term in prison, they will be released when they are 32 years old, which sounds crazy to me. They are being released when they are 32, which is still so incredibly young, which just shows they were 14 when they did this. I think it's easy to forget that.